Hello, I'm Scott Clover, and you're listening to the Intuitive Energy Podcast. This podcast series is about intuition, healing, and creating new energetic patterns that benefit you in your daily life. In my private practice, I help people heal from a diverse range of issues, including self-acceptance, trauma release, managing anxiety, emboldening self-worth, and creative expression. In this episode, titled Coming Out Intuitive, A Journey of Self-Acceptance, we discuss the importance of coming out as intuitive for your and society's overall benefits, understanding some of the impacts societal judgment and resentment have on our connection to our intuitive abilities while overcoming internal resistance. And we'll finish up with a connection to joy exercise. Enjoy.
Scott, it's so good to see you again. Season 3, episode 6 of the Intuitive Energy Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks.
It's great to see you and good to catch up. And we were having a chat before we started recording here about the importance of coming out intuitive and the personal and cultural collective aspects of that, which we may dip into today. But I think we're going to backtrack a bit, do a bit of context and look at the importance of the work you're doing, right?
Yeah, it's interesting for people to understand not just how to be intuitive, but why we are or aren't intuitive.
Okay.
So if you ask most intuitive people who do this professionally, they're going to say something similar to, well, we all have intuition, right?
Yes.
So yes, we all have intuition. Well, why do some of us access it differently than others? And a lot of us, it's just because we hinder it. We have it, but it's hindered by so many different factors. What hinders intuition?
Tell us, what does hinder it?
Well, what hinders intuition for a lot of us can be judgment from others. Why are we acting like this? How do we know things? If we're too good at it, or we're youthful and it annoys people, or it makes them think that we are connected somehow better, then that can also cause resentment, particularly in groups, in small groups, in elementary schools, or in families. And that resentment is then doubly felt by the empath, because it's the intuitive person or the empathic kid who's trying to pick it up and understand or process energy. And, essentially they just want to help. Well, in helping or being themselves, then that can cause judgment. And then in some, as I said, households or close-knit groups, judgment can become resentment.
Oh my goodness, that's like a double blow, isn't it?
It's a double blow for the empath.
You were only trying to help, weren't you? And not only did you get pushed back on your information, you kind of got pushed back on who you were being and who you are, right? Essentially,
right, because you are acting according to the energy that you're processing and metabolizing, as I talk about, and you're acting on it or saying something. And sometimes when we're children, we don't acknowledge boundaries or understand that what we're saying should be hindered for some reason or not spoken about. And so when we do this as children in groups or families, as I said, elementary schools and middle schools, then the people around us can either judge what's happening or resent themselves or resent the person who is intuitive.
Right.
And if that's happening, then the intuitive or empathic kid then feels the resentment and goes, ooh, that feels terrible. Like resentment is an awful, awful feeling for an empath to feel.
Yeah.
So then they're going to cater, then they're going to change their behavior so they don't elicit that response. And in doing so, then that hinders us as children because we're not self-expressing. Why? Because when we self-express or we say, oh, I know something that people aren't supposed to know, or I'm better at this, or I won this game because I was able to see something that other people weren't able to intuit, then that judgment starts and then the resentment, and it becomes personal, because resentment is personal. Resentment comes from somebody not liking themselves and then making that about the person who triggered that response in them. And the empath feels all that. And to us, it just feels gross. It feels like, why would we want that in our room or the environment that we're in? So we kind of backtrack and think, why? Why did that happen? That happened because I acted on my intuition and people weren't able to handle it. And that elicited a response in them that I don't like. So I might as well change how I reacted or communicated about what I saw or thought. Because if I do it again, I'm going to get that same reaction. And that resentment feeling is just so almost poisonous to us.
I'm feeling it right now, Scott. You can imagine, can't you, a little child, or we can relate ourselves to being small children with the best of intentions.
The best of intentions.
Yeah. Crushed in such a situation. So what happens then? I mean, I'm guessing a lot of people shut down and may never even try again. Such is the blow of that experience.
That happens for a lot of us. It happens for a lot of us, for people that are artists.
Yeah.
And if they present their art out into the world when they're kids and that art is not received fully or even appreciated, then they somehow take it personally. Or if it is good art, then the people who don't do good art resent them for it. And so that resentment is felt and it hinders us again.
Oh my
Right.
word. So
Yeah.
hence the importance of your work to re-encourage people to express themselves in this way. Because I'm seeing two forces at work there. There's almost like the organic talent of human beings. And I would put intuitions as part of our organic talent.
Yeah.
And then the societal energy, isn't there, of the pushback, of the put down. These are things that children aren't really born with, but they kind of pick them up as techniques. Let's call them techniques of survival.
Sure. We're all good at things and we're all not so good at things,
Yes.
right? And to judge ourselves being good at this or bad at that in a societal view then puts us in some sort of conditioned hierarchy or conditioned thinking hierarchy.
Yes.
And then we
Yeah.
have to maintain that, or if we jump out of that rut, so to speak, or remove ourselves, then we're the black sheep or we're going against the tribe. And then that's resentful as well. A lot of resentment when people leave the church or their family or that first chakra conditioning.
Yes.
And they go out on their own for what they feel is comfortable to them. More resentment from those around you.
So thank heavens for you then, and the work you do one-to-one in workshops, and the concepts that you're introducing to the world, basically through this podcast and other means. Then what next? Vulnerability, you say, is our greatest strength, perhaps. Isn't it difficult to be vulnerable after you've been through all of that?
Yeah, that's the whole point. Vulnerability, like the conditioned thinking, the societal pressures, and the patterns that get maintained or created by us in childhood. Then we grow up as adults and those patterns just get larger as we get larger. As our heads get larger, the patterns get larger as we age. So the pattern stays, but it just repeats itself or as the spiral gets larger as it goes up. So being vulnerable to it, being vulnerable enough to say, wow, I'm going to use my intuition and not someone else's thought process to solve my own issue. I'm going to look inward. Vulnerability is strength. And I think we need another word for vulnerability.
Has it been overdone? What do you mean?
Well, there's two meanings to it now. There's damsel in distress. And then there's I'm going to break away from the conditioned thinking or societal pressure and speak my soul speak, as I said. A lot of words, people call it speaking my truth.
Yes.
I call it being authentic and letting out your energy authentically or cleanly enough that you feel comfortable doing so. And that dissuades depression and increases self-esteem and just makes us generally overall feel better about ourselves. But if we're vulnerable enough to say, this is how I feel or how I emote, and I'm going to accept myself for doing that, then you can't really have other people around you imposing so many beliefs that are going to impact you, right?
Yeah. And so it is a form of exercise in a way, isn't it? It's trying it, seeing what comes back and growing stronger in, I guess, observing how we deal with the energy we're giving out and the energy that's incoming. And people can grow stronger, presumably, in their capabilities and skills in this department by at least trying and seeing if they're getting the same results as they got when they were that little child.
Yeah. Being comfortable and accepting yourself as an energetic and intuitive being and how you relate to society and the different groups that you're going to interact with. And you don't change your way of being or speech or thoughts depending on what group you're in. You're going to maintain more of a sense of self and stay more grounded in your body.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
So if you're allowed to be yourself and not judged by others, and you create that pattern or you recreate a pattern where you're not picking up all the judgment and resentment of other people, then who and what you are can't be used against you.
Right.
Does that make sense? You
Yeah,
can't use against me what I accept in myself.
From what you're saying, I'm deducing that we can only give ourselves the permission to be ourselves, and we can't wait for that to come from others.
Correct. Right. Or allow it, as I've talked before. There's allowing and permitting. Permitting is societal pressure. You have to give yourself permission to act accordingly. Or if you limit yourself for some reason, then you have to allow it.
Right.
One way to do both of those things is to tap into being vulnerable and saying, I'm allowed to be myself. That is the most vulnerable thing we can do as humans, is to allow ourselves to be ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And a gift to ourselves, first and foremost, and a gift to society. I guess it's to do with that. Be what you want to see in the world. If that's what you want to do, live in a more authentic world, then we might lead the way with that. And you're showing us the way with that, I think. Coming out intuitive, can we talk about the connection here between coming out as we understand it in society, in the LGBTQI community, and coming out intuitive? Are there parallels here?
Yeah, there are definite parallels. And the parallel is self-acceptance and
Right.
being your authentic self. If you live as you are, it's going to offend people who aren't living as themselves.
Ah, okay.
Kind of a mind fuck, but the people living as themselves somehow offend the people who aren't living as themselves. And that causes resentment. And generally, the people striving to live as themselves are empathic people who then pick up that resentment and have to overcome that. So, what I'm saying is, let's see and perceive these patterns for what they are by using our intuition and accepting and coming out and saying, I am intuitive. And when you do that, you find acceptance, support, understanding, comfort. Your relationships get a little better because you're being more authentic and you're speaking emotionally instead of, well, not I'm assuming what that person thinks and that person is assuming what I think. And when we do that, then people don't communicate very well.
It can be an unholy mess, that sort of stuff, can't it?
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely a connection. The difference is that we're all intuitive. You can say everyone's on some sort of spectrum or Kinsey scale, whatever, but this isn't about identifying and labeling so much as just self-accepting. That's
Yes.
what's similar. And so, yeah, I use that vernacular, that phrase coming out. It just means exposing yourself for who you are.
Wonderful.
And when you do that, you're going to feel better about yourself, but that may offend other people. And that's what we talked about at the beginning. If you offend other people by being yourself, then you're going to need a thicker skin.
That's interesting, though, isn't it? Because to me, and this is amazing, this parallel that we're discussing here, and I think it may come as quite a eureka moment for people to see that connection. But a thicker skin sounds counterintuitive, and I imagine you've got things to say about the phrase itself, counterintuitive. But this is such a fine balancing act, isn't it? That we're developing a thicker skin, not inhibit our intuitive ability in some way.
I would say a better boundary or a permeable boundary. A thicker skin is a colloquial phrase, right?
We do love these, don't we? We do love the
We
meanings.
do love colloquial, energetic phrases. So I would say a permeable barrier that you can let yourself out and not feel so intimidated by what's reverberating back to you.
So that's a very powerful image. That's a powerful image.
Many of us empaths have our antennas out to pick up everyone else's feelings because we grew up in households or in ways that our intuition was exposed or we needed to be on guard.
Yeah.
Right. So as adults, we don't need that skill set, but it's ingrained in us already. So it's already happening. Let's utilize it to embody and empower ourselves and embolden ourselves instead of being victimized by overfeeling.
Yeah. Okay. And that's a very powerful image then. So to have a membrane that's not too open. I mean, by definition, a membrane will be some sort of barrier, but we can control the amount of information coming in, can't we?
Correct.
Certainly we can control the amount of information going out. So it's a matter of dealing with that balance, is it?
Yeah, that's the coming out intuitive process, is understanding your apertures, understanding what you're picking up and what you're giving off, and where your energy is tied and relating and where your energy isn't. Are there blockages? Are there things that are blocking you? Right. And so a lot of times people who want to engage with their intuition need to acknowledge a sense of safety.
Yes.
And when they start to acknowledge a sense of safety, they're going to realize that they have resistance inside their body. For me to feel safe, I have to overcome the resistance. Well, what is the resistance? Is there a reason why that you're feeling intimidated or you're squandering your connection to your intuition, for example? And that can be taking a negative and then overcoming it. And that's not hopefully what this work can do. What this work can do is seeing the negative energy and removing it so you don't have to overcome it every morning.
Yeah.
So you don't have to wake up with the obstacle, right? I've lived with this so long and I'm waking up and I'm devoting a certain amount of energy to keeping it at bay or keeping it down. Well, if we release these patterns and we distinguish what they are and let them go, then you don't have to spend that energy every morning waking up and feeling less than, worthless, self-worth issues, and then overcoming those just to get out of bed.
Wow.
If we can clean up some of those things by self-acceptance and self-awareness, then the energy you take to get over something, you can utilize for something else because there's nothing left to get over, or the thing you need to get over has been removed.
How wonderful. What a relief that must be as well.
It can be for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And
And
it's
the
a bit,
joy connection that happens after that. The
yeah,
connection of joy is quite palpable for people.
sounds wonderful. Can you say something about hiding as well? Because that's in there in the parallel that was made earlier on. And the funny thing that's occurred to me about this, the hiding of one's capabilities, is there's a kind of dissonance with it as well, isn't there? It's like other people know as well, because everyone's intuitive to some degree, aren't they? So
Oh,
that the
yeah.
ones who might resent you are also thinking, I'm not quite getting everything about, they're holding something back, this other person. So
Mhm.
there's some benefit in that as well, isn't there? In not hiding anymore.
Correct. Well, authenticity recognizes authenticity,
Yes.
right? And so, yeah, you're going to self express just more freer, and you're going to be less confined. And that also feels like you're not keeping a secret.
Yeah.
What's your secret? Well, your secret is I'm holding on to something that I don't even know what it is, but it's vexing me or it's causing me problems. And I've known it since I was 8 or 9.
Yeah.
I had a client yesterday that said at 8 years old is when this thing happened to me. And we
Wow.
went in and we figured out what that pattern was, and she was releasing it. And then there was a joy connection.
Beautiful.
And so that's how simple this can be, but also how debilitating. It can be simple to remove if you acknowledge it, but
Yeah.
most of us aren't able to acknowledge it. And that's the debilitating part.
Yeah. And with the hiding and people saying, I'm so glad I knew there was something going on. And
Mhm.
there's the joy connection between people, right? The open arms is like, come here. Thank you for coming out to me. And the joy connection can be there from heart to heart between people as well, can't it? At that moment of authenticity.
Correct. And that's the exercise we're going to do at the end of it. Recognizing where your energy is and going is important. And also why you're feeling confined or why you're feeling sorrowful somewhere in your body and you just can't get a handle on it.
Yeah.
Well, reaching out for help, being vulnerable, asking someone to help you, or also connecting to your intuition is going to allow you to see and sense these patterns. So I'm connecting all these concepts of vulnerability begetting authenticity, seeing ourselves for who we are allows us to be more present in our body and also like ourselves more. It's really easy to like yourself when you're acting congruently and you're speaking congruently. It's a
Yeah.
lot harder when you're confining your actions and your deeds because you think that's going to impact other people favorably. If that impacts other people favorably and not yourself, then you're doing yourself and whatever communication a disservice or an injustice. So, finding out who and what you are is really paramount to connecting to that heartfelt joy, as I talk about.
And it just sounds like talking to you this, it sounds like there's less and less benefit and usefulness in hiding and not being who we truly are.
Hiding is a good word, but also confining ourselves or being
Limited.
malleable to others' impressions. If
Yes.
we confine ourselves or make ourselves more malleable to others' impressions, then we don't feel good in our bodies. And it's harder to get out of bed every morning.
Others are aware of that, aren't they? How we present like that energetically is at some level readable by everybody else because we're all energetic beings, right? To some level.
Correct. And if you see in our society today, there's so much disingenuousness happening.
Yeah.
The news is all about people not being authentic, that it's just weighs on us. And so it starts within us, and hopefully we can be that fountain and let it out, and it'll catch on in our families, in our groups, in our social circles.
Wonderful. So just remind us how you do this. You work one to one,
Yeah.
and this process, like you said, that you connected the person to that event in their life at 8 years of age. You unpicked, unpacked, and freed them, and you had the joy connection. And this is all also going on in group work and workshops, is it?
Right. I'm developing the Coming Out Intuitive workshop series. So it's sort of 3 level of workshops that help people not just be better at intuition, but just be connected to yourself. And then your intuition will flourish or your intuition will arrive on its own.
Hmm.
You want to understand and open yourself up in a metabolizable way.
Do you want to say more?
So,
What does that mean? What does that mean?
well, if you set the intention to say, I want to be more intuitive, well, one of the things that's blocking us, as I said at the beginning of the hour, is the judgment and the resentment of others and the societal pressures and things like that. If you release those, then you have more access to your intuitive information. And if you get then too much of it, you can't metabolize all of it.
Okay.
So there's also something about being overly intuitive and picking up too much, because if we pick up a cacophony, if we pick up too much information, that's not going to really suit us either. We can't then pick out what we need. So this is twofold in that, yes, you can self-accept and get over the issues of why, but at the same time, then you can pull the reins in and can select an aperture for you that works for you and allow the information in accordingly and appropriately and at levels that you can metabolize. Because if you can't metabolize the information, then everything else you receive is extraneous.
Amazing. I never thought of that. So you will help people in the workshop process to get that balance right, to come out intuitive, but then to not be so open that it becomes debilitating and that it can be,
Correct. And not be sort of hindered by the fact that you are intuitive.
because
You know,
that's
over receiving is a major issue in
yeah,
our society.
yeah,
And it's a major reason why there's, I would say personally, homelessness. There's a lot of homeless people can't deal with the reality that most of us live in because theirs is different.
right.
They're too open. They
Uh-huh.
one of their 10th, 13th chakras is way too open. And that's causing issues for them to calibrate and communicate on a basic level for us that we think as humans would be considered normal, right?
Yeah. And to such a
And
great
so,
extent that their lives are obviously materially and very in a very challenging way affecting them.
well, a lot of people out there aren't able to grasp the reality that most of us live in because they over perceive. Yeah.
Wow, never thought of it like that. Okay.
Two ends of the spectrum. And
Yes.
hopefully we can find a median or keep people in the green zone, in the
Yeah.
safe zones of saying, I'm picking up an appropriate amount of information that serves and suits me.
Wow. So this is I mean, literally vitally important, isn't it? This is a matter of vitality that we're talking about here.
Yeah. In a
To have
matter of safety, it's a matter of safety to acknowledge the resistance that you have to your intuition.
yes. Yeah.
And it's also safe to acknowledge that sometimes you over pick up and ways that you can protect yourself on both sides of that spectrum. And people striving to be more intuitive do both of those things every day.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Yeah.
some people are more open in one chakra and some people are very closed down in the other. Some people, the back of their chakra is really open and the front is very closed down. And
Mhm.
this can be up in the higher chakras. You know, we have way more than 7. Understanding your own self and coming out and accepting your own intuition helps you see these patterns, I would say, more eloquently
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
some
Okay.
nuance. Yeah.
Okay, and that sounds like advanced workshop material that you were just talking about there. How can people register, Scott? How do people get in touch with you to show an interest
You
in
can
the course?
check out the website. My website, scottclover.com. And there's also comingoutintuitive.com that will lead you there as well. And you can just leave your information if you're interested. I run the classes every few months. But it's not just about the classes. It's about, I want people to understand these concepts.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
listen back to what I said and realize that this happens to a lot of us in several different ways. So it's more the concepts of coming out intuitive as opposed to just the workshop itself. In that these are basic concepts that most people I haven't been hearing about. And so I'm trying to bring it out from another aspect of why intuition is important and how can it serve us universally, not just to be better psychics. It's to
yes.
be
What interesting.
better people.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. And it's
Yeah.
lovely to see how your work has developed in this way since we've been talking on the podcast here. And I believe, unless there's anything else you want to add, we're going to have a little bit of an experiential conclusion to the podcast today.
Yeah, I wanted to just to have people understand a little bit about sort of how they communicate to the universe and how the universe can communicate to them.
Mm.
So very simply, and you can do this with me, Carl, or with us all, is what we're going to do is called the heart to universal joy exercise. And what it is, it's just a way to communicate with universal energy a little easier and cleaner for you. So a simple way is to close your eyes. What is your way to communicate with the universal energy? Mine is, hey, I just look up and I say, hey, and see what happens. So you can say, hello. You can say, how you doing? Like Joey from Friends,
That was exactly what was in my mind, Scott.
right? How you doing?
Yes, and I'm walking down the street and I'm pointing and I'm smiling. Yes.
So just close your eyes and say it out loud. Whatever your catchphrase is to communicate to that universal energy, just go ahead and say it out loud.
Hey, how you doing?
Now, say it again in your head and follow where the energy goes. For a lot of us, the brain goes up and connects to that universal energy. Now, say it again aloud.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey. And now say it again in your mind's eye with your heart, and let your heart say it to the universe and follow that same direction. And feel the reciprocal connection. And let your heart bypass your head or pass through without stopping. Just let that heart energy connect to the universe, skipping through or passing through your head. Making sure the universal energy is coming back to you as well. And breathe. Let that connection warm through your heart and chest, all the way through your spine and ribs. Take a big breath. Let that smile come over your face. And just remember this corporally. Remember this somatic experience, this body energy connection experience. Remember what it feels like. And breathe. Wiggle your nose like you're on Bewitched. And before you open your eyes again, bring your fingers to your sternum, to your chest plate, and just make small little taps. Boom, boom, boom. Chin up, boom. Tapping your chest. Taking a breath. And coming back into the room.
That was great. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, I hope everybody listening or you listening enjoyed that as much as I did there. That was fantastic.
Now, I did it with us, and it was wonderful. The bypassing of the head and letting the heart go directly to that connection.
Yeah.
That's a microcosm of what these concepts that I'm referring to can be. And that energy you felt at the end where I said, remember that. Take a moment again and close your eyes and remember that. That's a muscle memory now.
Isn't it just?
That's a resource moment.
Well, yeah, thank you for that.
So you're able to recall that when you need to in the next coming weeks. That same energy. Just for 10, 15 seconds. Just remind yourself that you can do that.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
You've rendered me quite incapable of concluding the podcast, the Intuitive Energy podcast here with Scott Clover.
So everyone breathe into your perineum, down into your pelvic bone,
Ooh.
pelvic floor. So breathe into your perineum and your pelvic floor. And that should bring you back a little bit. So thanks for listening. If you want to know more about these concepts, you can check out my website, comingoutintuitive.com. I hope to hear from you.
Thank you for ending the podcast for me there, Scott. But that was really down to you for putting me in a condition where I was unable to do it. Thank you. Bye for now.
Yeah, you're very welcome. If you're interested in learning how to accept your own intuition, check out the Coming Out Intuitive workshop series on my website or go to comingoutintuitive.com. Thank you to Corey Tutt for the music, and please rate and share this podcast if you know someone interested in these concepts. Be well, and thanks for listening. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only, and solely as a self-help tool for your own use. I'm not providing medical, psychological, or nutrition therapy advice. You should not use this information to diagnose or treat any health problems or illnesses without consulting your own medical practitioner. Always seek the advice of your own medical practitioner and/or mental health provider about your specific health situation. For my full disclaimer, please go to scottclover.com/disclaimer.